There are a few words in the lexicon of business bullshit that engender more cynicism than the word culture. Yet every organization that we are part of, whether it be a Sunday League sports team, a startup, a government department, or a huge multinational, has a culture. Cynicism exists in the gap between what we say and what we do. And when it comes to culture, that gap is often very big indeed. Every organization has its values these days, whether it be a school or a company, they have their values on the website, proclaiming how fabulous their culture is. And yet, if we spend more than a few minutes, a few days perhaps, in that organization, we know that the reality of that culture is often very different. The only way we deal with the cynicism around culture is if we actively work to close that gap. However, for leaders, the ability to create a powerful culture really is a superpower. Over the past decade, I've turned around broken businesses around the world, and I've written 2 best-selling books on what I learned. And in every case, culture was a central part of not just what the businesses needed, but a central part of my strategy for that business. And I'm going to share with you now the secret to that success. We succeeded in every case because I helped the leadership teams understand and implement a really powerful culture. You don't need to spend millions of dollars on fancy consultants. Culture might be difficult to do, but it essentially is uncomplicated. And I'm going to share with you now the 4 steps that are the secret to that success. 1, what everybody gets wrong about culture. 2, how to understand what real culture is and what it does, and of course, I guess, what it doesn't do. 3, the best way to understand good and bad cultures. And 4, most important of all, the 6 characteristics that all great cultures have in common. And this approach works irrespective of the organization that you're in, and to an extent, irrespective of where you are in that organization. If you have people you're responsible for, then you are a leader. Therefore, your team has a culture. And so these principles can enable you to transform the performance of your team. So whether you run a Sunday League sports team, your department in a school, whether you work in a small startup or a large corporate, these principles apply to you and your teams. And the size of the prize is huge, not just for the organization or the team that you run, but for you and your career. The ability to create a world-class culture really is a leader's superpower. Chapter 1. What everybody gets wrong about culture. Over the past decade, I've worked with hundreds of CEOs, and these are the 2 most common responses I get when I talk to them about culture. The first is that I sort of start to see their eyes glaze over a little bit. Too many CEOs and too many leaders see culture as this kind of soft, squishy thing. This thing that maybe they've got a little bit of time for on the last day of the month after they've done all the serious grown-up business stuff. You can hear them thinking, or at least you can imagine them thinking, oh man, I give them fresh food at lunchtime, what more do they want? And this is one of the most common and most damaging fallacies around culture. Culture is not some soft, squishy thing. Culture is not something that CEOs can kind of outsource to the HR department. Culture is a hard physical thing and ultimately is the responsibility of the leader. And the second, even amongst CEOs who, or frankly leaders who take culture very seriously, very many people, in fact often very senior people, will agree with the idea that culture is a really important thing, but they somehow see culture as something that is bigger than them. They feel like, yeah, I kind of know culture is important, but it's really big, it's really complicated, it'll take ages to change, and I just don't know where to begin, and I haven't got the time and the energy to tackle it. Now, there's a little bit in there that's right. Certainly culture is extremely important, but culture is actually very quick to change if you set about it in the right way. And certainly if you have people that you're responsible for, culture isn't bigger than you, culture is on you. All leaders need to take responsibility for the culture that's in their team, not because they want to be nice people, not because they want to be liked, not because it's just the right thing to do. They need to do it because getting an effective culture in the teams that you're responsible for is the surest way for that team to begin to outperform, for that team to achieve greatness. And if your team achieves greatness, that's pretty good for your career. And let's face it, that's what leadership is. Leadership is in enabling your teams to achieve things they wouldn't were you not there. Chapter 2, understanding culture. Understanding is the prelude to solving. And here are 2 definitions of culture that if everybody understood them, we would all achieve so much more collectively and individually. Definition 1, culture is the behavior of the leadership team. That is what culture is always and everywhere. And that's why culture is in some ways so difficult to change, but in some ways so easy to change. The reality is that if you want to change a culture in a team of 2 people, an organization of 20,000 people, the only way to do it is to change the behavior of the leaders. There's no other way. And you can spend as much money as you like with consultants. You can write as many values on your website, write as many mission statements or purpose statements, but the culture will remain as the behavior of the leaders. If you work in a team, and in fact, let's be realistic, many leaders work in teams and also run teams. A great way to understand what the real culture in your team or your organization is to ask somebody this really simple question. What do you have to do to get on around here? It's a good question, right? The answer to that question is the real culture, because the answer to that question is what leadership really value. And the things they really value are the things that drive the culture. And the second definition is culture is the environment the leader creates in order for their teams to outperform. Culture isn't about being popular. Culture isn't about being nice. Culture isn't about Pilates or fresh fruit at lunchtime. All of those things might be part of the culture, but they don't define the culture, nor are they necessary ingredients for a successful culture. A culture is about creating an environment where that team can achieve things it wouldn't otherwise achieve. And in some ways, that's a pretty good definition for leadership, right? Because what great leaders do is they enable teams to achieve things they wouldn't otherwise achieve. Now, you're probably all thinking what I'm thinking, which is we can all think of plenty of people in leadership positions who don't manage to do that, but those people aren't leaders. Good leaders create an environment where their team achieves things they wouldn't otherwise have thought possible. And that is primarily through creating a powerful culture. Chapter 3, the culture spectrum. I get asked a lot about bad cultures. Can I define what a bad culture is? Well, I can't really define what a bad culture is. I can define what a good culture is. A culture is an environment the leader creates in order for their team to outperform, an environment where people achieve things they wouldn't otherwise achieve. And essentially a bad culture is everything that isn't that. And I imagine culture looking a bit like it does on this spectrum that I've drawn here. At one end, you've got truly toxic cultures. Now, most cultures aren't like that. I really hope that nobody watching this oversees a culture like that. If you do, you need to have a word with yourself. And I hope even more that nobody watching this is having to work in a culture like that. Honestly, if you are, you need to get out. The good news, or at least the less bad news, is that most cultures aren't truly toxic, but some are. So that's one end of the spectrum. And then you go right to the other end and you've got some cultures that are just remarkable. Environments where it just works, where the leadership team get it, they invest time, they invest energy, sometimes they invest money in it, and they do that not because they're super nice, kind people. They do that because they know that is the surest way for their organization to outperform, to achieve, to go beyond perhaps what was thought possible. And then what you've got is you've just got the mass in the middle. The majority of organizational cultures sit somewhere between those two, a bit better or a bit worse. But as you can see from this model I've drawn, there isn't much difference between most of them. And your opportunity, your challenge as a team leader at any level, is to work out how you can push your team along this spectrum. How can you continually be pushing your team essentially to the right along this model? That's the leader's challenge, and it's not a challenge that ever ends. As soon as you take your eye off your culture, it'll gradually drift back left. That's just the way the world works. Culture doesn't happen by accident. It's a conscious investment. But this model is the best way to understand the difference between the truly great, the truly awful, and the large jelly-like mass, if you like, that exists in the middle. So before we get to chapter 4 and talk about the 6 characteristics that all great cultures have in common, I want to say thanks very much for watching this video, and please remember to like and subscribe for tons more career-changing content. And also, it really helps get the word out there. The best way for you to ensure that you're going to have a great career is for you to continually work for great bosses. So perhaps share the link with him or her right now. Let's get on with chapter 4. The 6 characteristics that all cultures share in common. This might seem a bit counterintuitive to you because culture is often seen as this sort of intangible thing. We know a good one when we feel it, we know a bad one when we feel it, but we're not completely sure what makes up a good or bad culture. And consultants and all sorts of other businesses make billions of dollars every year from selling businesses their services to help them create fantastic cultures. And very often organizations feel obliged to search out unique words, unique language, particular ways of describing the kind of culture they want to create. That's fine if you want to do that, but I'm telling you, whatever language you choose to use, however you express it, whatever values, however you go about doing it, at the end of the day, if you create a culture that enables your teams to outperform, it will contain some or all of these 6 common characteristics. All great cultures contain these 6 characteristics. The closer they get to them, the better the culture. And when you think about it, that's not really that surprising, because at the end of the day, I've spent so much time with so many different types of businesses, and what I learned was that even though businesses and organizations, not just businesses, look different from the outside, when you scratch beneath the surface, all organizations have about 99% of their DNA in common. And why is that? Well, that's because all organizations at the end of the day are made up of people, and by and large, people are all the same. So it's not that surprising that therefore all great cultures are the same. So don't reinvent the wheel. Save yourself time. Get these 6 characteristics down. It is the most rewarding experience you can possibly have. It will transform your career, it will transform your team, and it will transform the careers of the people that work for you. Culture is that powerful. Culture isn't bigger than you. It's on you. And most importantly, you can do it too. And here's how. The 6 characteristics are: 1, autonomy. That means I get to work in a way that suits me. I get to problem solve in a way that suits me. You can't be a micromanager and run a hugely powerful culture. Sorry to break the news to you, but it's as straightforward and as simple as that. If I had to sum up great culture in one word, that one word would be autonomy. Number 2 is trust. I trust my colleagues and my colleagues trust me. I always say to the people that work for me, if you don't trust the people that work for you, get people you do trust. But don't crush them with a dead hand of micromanagement, because if you do, they'll stall, you'll stall, everybody loses. Number 3, safety and support. I can say things and try things I otherwise wouldn't. And crucially, I support my colleagues when they do the same. Number 4 is great communication. All great cultures are great communicators. Particularly, they are great at conflict resolution. Great cultures are able to disagree without falling out. If nobody ever disagrees, nothing ever changes. So disagreement is a really, really important part of really effective cultures, but they're able to do that and frankly remain friends. Number 5 is consistent and predictable. In great cultures, the same rules apply to everybody. A great culture, any culture, is only as strong as its weakest link. If the rules don't apply to anybody, everything falls apart. And of course, that matters even more the more senior somebody is. We've all seen it and we all know them. Number 6, a work in progress. All great cultures are a work in progress. You can't create a great culture by having a quick workshop and then forgetting about it for 5 years. Remember that spectrum. Great cultures are always striving to push themselves up that curve, to move to the right, and that requires continuous investment of time, energy, sometimes money, primarily by the leaders, but also by the whole organization. Great cultures may be driven by the behavior of leadership, but they are owned by everybody. So those are my 4 principles for creating a world-class culture. Culture really is a leader's superpower. There's no mystery to it. Just follow these principles and it's applicable to any organization you work in, no matter where you are, no matter what you do. It's not easy to do, but understanding how to do it really is worth the effort. It'll transform your organization and perhaps even more importantly, transform your career. Culture is not just how you propel yourself forward, it is how you transform the careers of others. It's a huge topic and I'll be producing plenty more videos on it, including one on how to lead and implement a culture change program. If there's anything in this video that you haven't understood or you'd like to expand on, please let me know in the comments. And again, remember to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.